In this video, we're going to give you a quick introduction to frameworks. The difficult way of writing software is to write everything yourself. All the common functionality that you find in every single application, you're just going to have to keep repeating over and over and over again. And this is where a framework can be quite useful, because a software framework provides a standard way to build and deploy your applications. And so it provides a universal, reusable software environment that will provide all the commonly used functionality. So, for example, if you want to be able to send information from one place to another, or you want to provide security solutions, then all of that kind of thing is built into the framework. And all you've then got to do is to write your own parts of the application that then bolt into the existing software that the framework provides. Now, in more advanced features of frameworks, the developer can change and augment the generic functionality by adding their own code. Otherwise, you can just make use of the existing standard software and just bolt in your own components. So some of the benefits of using a framework is that this list of low-level complexity is done for you. So, for example, data storage, if you want to be able to work with databases, for example, then that can be done for you with just a tiny little bit of configuration. Or if you want to make your application scalable, then that will be addressed by the framework. If you want to make your application extensible, which is an important part of an enterprise application, then the framework can help to manage the deployment of components as and when they are developed. All the security concerns that are prevalent, indeed ubiquitous these days, these can be taken care of by the framework. And network communication is also already provided by the framework. So this is a lot of functionality that will be needed by pretty well every application that you don't have to write yourself as the developer, and it's provided by the framework. So that's quite a lot of benefit. It also means that frameworks can reduce the complexity of developing your enterprise application, because it allows you to focus on your application-specific functionality rather than having to write over and over again all the generic features of enterprise applications. But there are some demerits, disadvantages. For example, by their nature, frameworks are likely to impose a lot of decisions, which can be frustrating if the decision that is imposed is not really what you want to do. And it can also be quite confusing when learning a new framework, and it's useful to have somebody guide you through those initial stages of learning about a framework. Sometimes frameworks can hide away too much detail, which is particularly difficult when it comes to debugging. And sometimes you'll get a message about something that you actually haven't written, but it's caused by your code, but the problem manifests itself somewhere down in the framework. So that can be a bit tricky. Frameworks encourage integration with business logic. In other words, when you adopt a framework for your enterprise, it might well be, if you're not careful, that you will write code that makes use of the framework in areas where perhaps it shouldn't be used. And so you get locked into a framework, and that then can make it very difficult to change from one framework to another. And one of the things that we'll consider in this module later on is how we can structure the architecture of our enterprise applications so that this is not a particular problem. So here are some examples of software frameworks. You might have heard of some of them. And you'll notice that there are quite a few languages represented by these frameworks. And there are very many frameworks available. Now in this module, we'll be using Spring Boot, which is an interpretation of the Spring framework. So it's going to provide comprehensive programming and configuration for modern Java-based enterprise applications, but it requires significant time and knowledge to configure and write and deploy. So that's the full-blown Spring framework. It is huge and also complex until you get used to it. So when beginning the use of the Spring framework, it might be that it's more desirable to make use of the Spring Boot environment. Now this is a popular open source framework, and what it will do is allow us to write our own enterprise applications, and these will be based or run on the Java virtual machine, and will allow us to jump into the Spring framework. And in the next video, that's what we'll talk about.